Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. My name is Callie Ochanicki and I'm a Customer Success Associate here at YCharts. Hosting our webinar today is my colleague Jared Fox, an account executive on our team. For today's topic, we are going to take a look at the equity screener and newly redesigned data tables to perform sector analysis. Throughout the webinar, we'll have a live Q&A via chat where you can ask questions in the section to the lower right-hand corner of the screen. We will answer some of those questions at the end of Jared's demonstration. Any questions that are not answered during the Q&A session will be answered by your support contact. Please keep in mind that the content of this webinar is meant for educational purposes only and is not intended to be used as investment advice, nor is YCharts acting as an advising party regarding client funds in any way. Finally, as always, a recording of the webinar will be made available on the website and sent to all attendees. Now I'm going to pass off to Jared to get us started.
Thank you, Callie. And for all those listening, thanks for joining us today. As Callie mentioned, today we're going to be highlighting how to leverage your YCharts account to find and then analyze investments using a few of the time-saving tools within the platform. So more specifically, we're going to cover, number one, how to use the YCharts screener to find a favorable investment list amongst a peer group. The peer group today is going to be a list of semiconductor stocks, but please note that as I go through the workflow, for those that are more interested in researching funds or ETFs, a lot of these same concepts can be applied to the workflows that you might go through. The second thing we're going to do is take that list into our comp tables tool and walk through how to evaluate the most important recent data off that previously screened list. The last thing we're going to go through is take our investments into the Timeseries Analysis tool where you can take and evaluate that list over different historical time periods. And as Callie mentioned at the end of all of this, we'll wrap up with questions. With that said, let's jump into our account. First thing I'm going to do in my logged in account is navigate away from our home page here and go to the Tools dropdown where I'll find Equity Screener. Now that we're in the Equity Screener, we're able to see that we've got a broad universe of individual stocks. And the way to use our Equity Screener is hinged highly off these two buttons on the left-hand side here. So whether you're in the fund or the Equity Screener, they do function similarly in terms of the buttons. The Modify Equity or Fund Universe is going to be where you can come in and screen off of qualitative metrics. For stocks, this can be things like a certain index, a certain sector or industry, which is what we're going to jump into here in a second. For funds, it might be a certain style box or a fund focus, perhaps even brokerage availability in your list. With that said, let's jump into a specific sector, as I mentioned, technology, which will open up our menu of industries within the tech sector. And first, I'm going to select semiconductors. Clicking Submit narrows down our universe. The next thing I'm going to do is go back into our Modify Equity universe. Come back into sectors, technology. And as I go through this, I'm going to use the add function, which can also be considered the OR command of many systems. So when I come into this, I want to add semiconductor memory. And now we have our qualitative list here. The next button that I'm interested in here is the Add a Metric filter. And this is going to be the button on your screen that allows for quantitative filtering. When you bring up this window, you do have the option to browse a menu of 4,000 different metrics for a stock, or if you're looking at funds and ETFs, multiple hundreds of metrics on that front. If you know exactly what you're looking for here, which in this case I do, you can also simply click where it says search ... and start to type in our metrics. In this case, I want to start my screen looking at stocks that are going to be trading at a favorable discount to their sector based off their price to sales ratio. Typing in PS ratio relative brings up a menu here where I can select the top option. Since we're looking at a valuation metric, we do want to look for a less than value to the sector. And by typing less than 1, clicking enter on my keypad and bringing up the blue box around my number, I'm able to submit and get rid of any companies that are trading not at a discount to that sector. The next thing I want to do here is add another metric filter and sort off of market cap to ensure that these companies are relevant based off of total market cap. By clicking market cap greater than and then 2B, enter, I can finish my screening portion of this. This brings us to 17 individual companies, and you'll notice that as you screen and filter off certain metrics, they now become columns within our screen. In this case, we are looking at all US companies, so I'm going to get rid of my currency code column so we can focus our energy on what we do want to see here. And after you run through your filters, the important buttons to note are going to be down here on the right-hand side of my screen, 5 buttons where we can add information to this list. The first piece of information I want to add is the actual price to sales ratio for these companies. Column 1 tells us at where they're trading at against their sector. However, it's nice to know the actual number here. So opening up that menu and typing in price to sales ratio, I can bring up their most recent valuation metric there. The add info columns, whether you're in the stock or fund screen, is going to be the qualitative portion of adding data. So if I was in the fund screen, we can come in and find a specific share class, a prospectus objective, maybe it's a category name. If I'm in the stock sector, maybe it's something as simple as headquarters city, country, exchange name, or IPO date. All columns within our screening and the other 2 tools we're going to be jumping into here are data sortable, so I can drag those around. I can also click and find the most undervalued companies simply by clicking the header within that price to sales column and bringing that forward. The button on the left-hand side here, our scoring models button, is going to take data sort to the next level, because what it's going to allow a user to do is create a combined score, which you can then rank your current list, 1 through whatever number, in this case, 17 companies. By clicking into the scoring models, I can give our score a name and then start to add some important components here. For example, let's say I'm interested in the return on equity for each one of these companies over the last 3 years on average. I click my metric, I determine whether I want a higher or a lower value, and how important that metric is going to be towards this overall score for our data sort capabilities. As I add additional components here, we determine whether we want a higher or lower value and their weightings, and then we save it where it will show up on our menu on the left-hand side here, in this case, our bright score, which I've created. You'll see the result here, the return on equity, 5-year average, higher value preferred. All the way down the list there, you'll notice that the 1 valuation metric, we do specify a lower value as preferred there. And in this case, we've equal weighted this. By adding this score column, as I mentioned, we can now sort by 4 different metrics that are all going to have some pull and weight within the overall evaluation. Instead of just sorting off of a revenue metric or a valuation metric, we've combined different. And now we see 1 through 17 sorted by that score. I'll also note that you can save a watch list off of this result. That's going to be a status list, the static list of these 17 companies. Up in the top left, however, you can also save the actual screen, which puts our filters on lock and moves any companies or funds or ETFs in and out of that screen if they no longer meet that criteria. Saving the screen is going to allow us to activate alerts, so we can actually keep tabs on if any fund manager has left a fund, for example, or if any semiconductor stock, in this case, starts to trade above its sector average. That leads us to the next part of our evaluation here, which is by going to our tools dropdown into the comp tables tool. So where screening takes a great dive into idea generation and new research, Our comp tables tool is going to be to continue that research or to perform due diligence on an already screened upon list of securities. The comp tables tool lets you add security by security across the left-hand column. It lets you add tables of metrics, but it also lets you automate your workflow by bringing in that saved screen and populating the table all at once. Now, if we want to add certain metrics, we simply go to the search bar right there in the middle of the screen where it says Add, and start to apply some additional data columns. If I add my revenue 3-year growth, we start with that column. You will know that there's an add, notice an add button right here and a browse button. The browse is going to open up a menu for you to go through, much like that screen would. But of course, if you know what you're looking for, you can come in here and start to type it out. And as I click the menu, we start to populate this table of important results. Now, as I mentioned, the most successful YCharts users are saving these tables. They're saving these screens so they can automate their workflows and gain more time back during their day. An example of that would be to come here to your metric sets and save the metric set so you can open it from a library and evaluate seamlessly with the click of a button. You'll notice I have my Bright Score metric set as well saved, and by clicking that, I'm able to pull up any number of data columns that I've already populated with the click of a button. If I wanted to add a few additional information here, I can simply add it on to my already saved metric set. I will note the summary stats button on the right-hand side of your screen here. If you're looking at a group of large cap managers, semiconductor companies in this case, you can easily come in here and average out your information. You can also get minimum and maximum values to get a sense of where each manager or where each stock compares to their respective group. You'll notice that you do have the scoring models button here as well in the add info or qualitative information columns. So the score that we build in our screen can come right back in here and be used for the analysis as well. Once again, sliding over our data columns here, readjusting and sorting gives us our 1 through 17 if we wanted to evaluate it as such in the comp tables. The comp tables tool, as mentioned, is a point-in-time analysis for the most part. It's the latest data that's in the YChart system for each one of our securities. If you wanted to take this into a more historical and time series analysis, you'll go to part 3 of the workflow here, which is going to be in the tool time series analysis. In the time series analysis tool, we're going to be able to bring in our list in the same fashion that we did in the comp tables. Now the difference here is going to be really looking at one metric hard over certain time periods. So instead of looking at 5, 6, 7 different metrics, let's focus on one metric in particular and see how they've trended over time. For example, the valuation metrics for each one of these stocks on a price to sales basis. The first step is going to be to add that metric into our table. You'll notice the frequency button right in the middle of my screen, which is the most important button in the time series tool because it's going to arrange our data by whatever time period we want. For example, if we were interested in the month-end price to sales ratio for each one of these companies going back historically, we can find that. You'll notice the February 28th, 19 column. For that column, you're looking at an intra-month data set. So we're not done with the month of February yet, but the fact that YCharts does provide data that updates so quickly gives you that intra-month column. Another thing we'll see a lot of our users do is look at rolling returns during time periods. Let's start with 1 month total returns on a monthly frequency. I can get rid of our price to sales ratio here. We've got 1 month total returns, and we already have the frequency set to monthly, so we've got that. If we wanted to just see the 1 month total returns, or even like a 3-year total return on a rolling yearly basis, we simply add that metric, change our frequency, down to annual here, and we're able to see those data sets. The few gaps in data here just mean that that company hasn't been around to achieve a total return for that time period. But for this first company in our list, this 116% is, as of December 31st, a 3-year total return, and all the way back down the line. So the theory of time series analysis is just going to be to simply take any list of companies or funds or managers, could be an index data set, and view those over any flexed time period that you'd like, whether it be a certain metric or just simply returns. And that rounds out our workflow, where we started in the screener and found a favorable list amongst a peer group based off valuation metrics. We then went into the comp tables, where we further analyzed that list with different metrics that we care about and applied some of the same concepts like the scoring model. Lastly, we jumped in here to the time series tool, where we were able to take specific data points and look back historically over time to understand how these companies have trended based off those different metric sets. Thanks everyone for joining the webinar portion and the workflow portion of today's call. I'm now going to turn things back over to Callie for Q&A.
Thank you, Jared, for giving us a closer look at the equity screener and the new data tables tools. Before we jump into the Q&A, I do want to mention again that a recording of this webinar will be made available in the support topics section of our site, just in case you need to review anything we went over or share it with your colleagues. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. These are a few that really stood out to us. I'm going to bring these up to Jared to answer. The first question, how can I have a safe set of securities in comp tables?
Sure, Callie. So the first step is going to be to create a watch list and or a screen. As you know, and for those of you that don't know, creating a watch list is either done through the dashboard itself, which you can navigate to through the YCharts logo in the top left of your account, by clicking Create Watch List, dictating whether it's going to be equities or funds, and then adding in those tickers. You can also create a watch list, as I mentioned, through the screen itself. Now, when you get into the comp tables, step 2 is going to be leveraging those saved screens and or watch lists and pulling them in by this list button. So as I did on the workflow, whether it be an equities list or a funds list, as you scroll down in the left-hand side of your menu, you can see the ability to bring in a saved screen or a saved watch list. And just a reminder, a saved screen is going to be an updating list based off of certain filters. A watch list is going to be a static list that you've created in your account.
All right, great. And the second question, can I bring in my model portfolios into comp tables or time series?
You can. So once you create a model portfolio in your account through the tools drop-down model portfolios, they're going to live as an active security within the system. So in the same way you would bring in a fund, an ETF, a stock, you can actually bring in your model portfolio. So each model portfolio has a unique key and a unique name that you've created. And by typing in this case, mutual fund balance model that I have in my account, I can bring in an entire model and pull up metric sets to evaluate, just as I might a list of securities. In this case, 5-year risk metrics, or maybe some qualitative information like down to the S's here, my sector exposure metric set, where I can see how my model portfolio is exposed on an equity sector basis.
Awesome. And then the last question, and this is a very popular question we see, when I was clicking around in comp tables and adjusting the time frequencies, what's the difference between market daily and daily?
Yeah, good question. So in the time series tool, there are the frequencies button, and I mentioned that's the most important button when you're trying to parse your data in these tables. So what Callie's referring to, I think, is the frequency button right here. And if you click this menu open, you see daily and market daily. Quite simple. The daily is going to include weekdays, but include any weekends or non-traded, not include any non-traded holidays. That's going to be the market daily, and the daily is going to include all trading days.
Great. And thank you, Jared, for covering these questions, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. We are excited to be releasing the newly designed comp tables and time series analysis tools, and we would appreciate any feedback you may have. If you have any questions in regards to the screening or data tables tools or have interest in gaining access to them, feel free to reach out to your YCharts contact.